Well, each week, a group of insiders joins me to offer perspectives on some of the week's top stories. This week, sounding off on a new year and a new session of the General Assembly. And the Colts into the playoffs for the first time since 2014. Colts and Pacers both on the right track, seemingly. Our insiders this week are Bo's Public Affairs Group Principal Roger Harvey. Also, Faegre Baker Daniels partner Murray Clark. And Hollowell Consulting President Jennifer Hollowell. And thanks one and all for being a part of this edition of the Insiders. I'll start with the Indiana General Assembly has just kicked off in full gear for the 2019 session. A number of issues out there. Roger, I'll start with you. What do you think will be the top issue or that hot button issue that's really going to get a lot of attention?
Well, by far, because this is a budget year, it's going to be what are we going to do with the money, right? And there's going to be lots of people with ideas. And the reality is, I'm sure we'll talk about this during the segment, but a lot of the money has already been apportioned to whether it's Department of Child Services and other areas. So there's a small amount of money where a lot of people are going to be trying to get their projects taken care of. And that'll be the big battle that'll overshadow the entire session.
Yep. Jennifer?
A lot of ideas for the money, not a lot of money. I mean, the message that the governor and legislative leaders have been saying to people for weeks is there is not much left. And the DCS, even what they're requesting, $286 million for each year for the next 2 years. If that and the Medicaid requests and those things came in full, you're looking at like $35 million for all these other things that people want to see funded. And so it's going to be a challenge in figuring out what gets funded.
Yeah, that on the one hand, in the year, the governor talked optimistically about finding money for increased teacher pay, which is going to be a challenge, I think.
Yeah, I think we have to wait to see. I think they have some plans, but we have to wait and see what those are going to be. The state of the state, part of that will be a description there. But there are other people have ideas about raising revenue, right? Whether it's cigarette taxes and other things, but it's too early to see what's going to happen.
All right.
Well, thank heaven the state's in good shape, really. I mean, and Roger and Jen are right. So you have this DCS pressure. You had a special appropriation of $250.
And we talked DC, Department of Child Services.
Department of Child Services, and now they want to build it into their budget, and that's a real challenge. So we'll see what happens. But really, it's worth pointing out, 2-year budget in a budget session. This is the long session. It'll go until the third week of April, something like that. We like to say, in the end, everything's about the budget.
Yeah. And Jennifer talked about potentially raising some revenues. The State Chamber of Commerce is out with their agenda, and Kevin Bringer was on the show earlier this week talking about this focus on health, and that includes kind of revisiting this whole idea of a $2 per pack tax increase. Is that going to? You think there's an appetite at the State House?
Well,
for
it's
that
not the first time that's been proposed. I think generally the Republicans in the supermajorities aren't fond of any tax increases, but no doubt the chamber behind the movement is powerful. There's also discussion of raising the age of smoking from 18 to 21.
What do you think about this whole smoking issue, raising the age, the tax? Do you think we'll get traction and actually go somewhere this session?
I mean, there's a fairly big coalition that's formed for it, and the state chamber certainly being a leader is important. But there have been some pretty strong voices coming from high levels of the government saying it's not something they're interested in. So I think it's going to have to be a pretty compelling case for legislators to go there.
A number of people in the business community, tech community in particular, concerned that attention, a lot of attention will be drawn away toward potential hate crimes legislation and how that may cast the state of Indiana on more of a national scale. Roger, as you look at that debate, Indiana, I think one of 5 states without specific language, hate crime legislation language. Where do you see that debate?
Well, that's another one that's been around for a while. It's been talked about. You do have some new members in the legislature, but I think that's going to be one that'll probably go right down to the wire, if you will. There's going to be a lot of folks, because there's people that have real concerns about it, and there's others that are very passionate about it, and you have the business community that certainly is supportive of not being one of those 5 states that you referenced. So it'll come down to the wire, I think, for that one. Do you
since this will become that contentious issue, just a few short years ago, the RFRA issue and the attention and with social media that generated?
Well, so I've worked on this issue in the past for it, and have watched it very closely. Speaker Bosma has been really clear that he doesn't want this to become divisive. He doesn't want everything to get hung up in it. It's hard to manage through that, but there are a couple of things that are really different this year, and the biggest one is that Governor Holcomb has come out for it, and he's been leading on it and with a strong voice. And we haven't necessarily had that in the past. It's been kind of left more for the legislators to see if they could get there before the governor would really have to weigh in publicly. So I think his involvement makes it different. They're also, speaking of coalitions, there's a really big coalition forming for it with a lot of businesses. It isn't just kind of the nonprofit world and other, it's all kinds of companies and folks across the state. So, I mean, I think it's going to be their best chance, and it looks somewhat promising, but it gets tricky.
Another issue that likely to be on the agenda is sports gambling. Gambling, that a number of states have already approved that. Indiana, another state that will look at this. I think the governor has, I don't know if he's necessarily come out in support of it, but I think generally they feel as though there is support at the
momentum,
state level there. Does it get through this?
Well, I
this
mean,
session?
my friends say it will. To me, this just has the earmarks of an issue that as the session goes on and you deal with all the tough financial issues and then maybe some other ancillary, difficult, challenging issues, that this one gets to the end and maybe doesn't get over the finish line. But I could be wrong about that.
What's interesting about this one, though, is when you're talking about not a lot of money, this is another one of these revenue streams, because and that's where it gets interesting, is in the details, right? Because, are you talking just online betting, or do you have to physically go to a facility, and does that help the casino industry? And then what's the state's take on that? And I mean, there's a lot of moving parts on this. It's not just sports betting in general, and you're seeing 30-something states or so across the country that are going to be tackling this very issue. So that's one where you're looking for ways to generate revenue and help a supporting industry. That could be, it could be interesting to see how that plays out.
Speaking of sports, as we wrap up, the Colts in the playoffs for the first time in a few years. Now, as we tape this show, and in some areas of the state, Indianapolis included, as it airs, the game will already be over with the Texans, so we don't know how that played out. But the Colts obviously had quite a comeback year. The Pacers, fourth best record, I think, in the NBA. Both of our major league teams headed in the right direction.
Wait, didn't I tell you that the Colts would go to the playoffs?
I don't remember that.
Well, I mean, I think I said they go undefeated, but
that's.
But kudos to them, huh?
You're right.
1 out of 2.
You're batting 500 in baseball. That's a great percentage.
Exactly. But what it does to the city is amazing.
Absolutely.
Just the electricity. And
no, absolutely. And I think by the time you tape this show next week, we'll be talking about another playoff game.
I like that. Kansas City. I like it. Roger Harvey, Jennifer Hollowell, Murray Clark. Thanks one and all, and we'll be right back after this.